In 1499, Gian Giacomo Trivulzio, Marshal of the French army, was asked what was needed to conduct a military campaign successfully. Trivulzio famously replied, "Three things are necessary: money, money, and more money." The war in Ukraine is no exception. Apart from invaluable losses of the lives of the Ukrainian ordinary citizens and soldiers, enormous amounts of money are necessary to defend against the Russian invasion. It is not only about military spending, it is about the state budget as well. Let us not forget that Ukraine is forced to spend much of its budget on military means, so the West and its allies also contribute to the Ukrainian budget, which keeps the country running. So the hottest topic now is how much foreign aid Ukraine actually has received. The short answer is not enough. But that's not the answer that will satisfy you and me, right? And with the orange fascists from the White House screeching and screaming all the time like somebody took his fake tan spray, I want answers also, and you deserve answers. In this video, we'll find out exactly who has sent how much, how many hundreds of billions to Ukraine in foreign aid, how much US and how much Europe. We'll begin with the United States. Since Russia launched its invasion in February 2022, Ukraine has emerged as the largest beneficiary of US foreign aid. This is noteworthy, as it is the first occasion a European nation has occupied this leading position since the Truman era, which saw significant funding for rebuilding Europe through the Marshall Plan post-World War II. However, 2025 may signal a shift. Donald Trump, in early March, suspended all aid to Ukraine while urging the nation to advance peace discussions with Russia. Additionally, the US has halted intelligence sharing with Ukraine, interrupting the delivery of crucial information that has assisted the war-affected country in targeting Russian forces. Why is Trump all barking at Ukraine, but mute on Putin? Because he's busy flexing his deal-maker muscles in Kyiv while saving his breath to blow kisses across Moscow. His tough talk stops at Kremlin's doorstep. Unsurprisingly, one of the most vocal voices of talking about the United States foreign aid to Ukraine is Donald Trump himself. He kept repeating the same number again and again, that US has sent Ukraine $350 billion worth of aid, which, mildly speaking, is nonsense. It's orange man fascist nonsense. But you know, it's Trump. In his speech to Congress, Trump said, and I quote, "Europe has sadly spent more money on buying Russian oil and gas than they have spent on defending Ukraine by far." Think of that. They've spent more buying Russian oil and gas than they have to defend. And we've spent perhaps $350 billion, and they've spent $100 billion. And we have an ocean separating us, and they don't. And Biden has authorized more money in this fight than Europe has spent. Now, there are truths in this sentence, half-truths, and complete lies also. There's everything. This passage discusses an important issue about how the European Union buys energy. Sadly, it is true that the EU has spent a lot of money on Russian oil and gas during the difficult time. Research from the Center of Research on Energy and Clean Air, CREA, they're called CREA, shows that the 27 EU member states spent over 205 billion euros on Russian fossil fuels like oil, coal and gas since Russia's full-scale invasion on Ukraine in 2022. So yeah, 205 billion euros, it's really bad, and Trump is right on that. However, the next passage about the $350 billion in aid to Ukraine from the US is bananas. It's full orange fascist man bananas. And why does Trump keep saying the US gave Ukraine $350 billion? Because he thinks his standing budget is a national defense fund. Now Ukraine's facing Russia with a bronzer cannon that's all glow and no go. However, on a serious note, even the Department of State of the United States and the Department of Defense had to correct Trump's claims. The State Department said the following, quote, To date, we have provided 66.5 billion in military assistance since Russia launched its premeditated, unprovoked and brutal full-scale invasion on Ukraine on February 24, 2022, and approximately $69.2 billion in military assistance since Russia's initial invasion of Ukraine in 2014. We have now used the Emergency Presidential Drawdown Authority on 55 occasions since August 2021 to provide Ukrainian military assistance totaling approximately $31.7 billion from the DoD stockpiles. End of quote. So the overall US military aid since then has been $69 billion. Very nice. And that is considering the aid since 2014. The actual amount of US military aid since 2020 is $66.5 million. It is nowhere near $350 billion of military aid that Trump keeps parroting about. If the US actually spent $350 billion in military aid to Ukraine, the war would be over faster than Trump running towards a fake tan salon. It's also important to highlight the significant financial support provided by the US government in relation to the war in Ukraine. According to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy, approximately $128 billion of the total US spending has been allocated specifically to assist the Ukrainian government. The majority of the remaining funds have been directed towards supporting various US activities linked to the conflict, while a smaller portion has gone to aid other countries in the affected region. But to really understand how the U.S.A. to Ukraine is composed, we have to look at the US budget. The US Congress has passed 5 pieces of legislation that have delivered aid to Ukraine since the onset of the war. The most recent approval occurred in April 2024. The total budget authority specified in these laws, the headline figure frequently referenced by the media, is $175 billion. These unprecedented amounts have supported a wide range of Ukrainian individuals and institutions, including refugees, law enforcement agencies, and independent radio stations, although the majority of the assistance has been related to military needs. The US Congress budget for Ukraine aid is so complicated that even the calculator needs a bailout just to figure it out. The United States has sent equipment to Ukraine through 3 primary mechanisms: the Presidential Drawdown Authority, PDA, the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, U.S.A, and foreign military financing. But here's a caveat. The idea of aid to Ukraine can be misleading. While it may seem like a lot of cash is being sent there, around 72% of the money and 82% of the military assistance will actually be spent in the United States. Now listen to these numbers again. We're talking 72% of the money and 82% of the military assistance spent on the United States soil never leaves the US. This is something that people who vote for Trump, the MAGA people, they don't get inside their heads, that their money, majority of it, doesn't leave the United States soil. And they say, oh, Ukraine is taking my taxpayer dollars. Well, they're not. Your taxpayer dollars are being used to create jobs in America that create weapons that will be sent to Ukraine. I mean, this is because weapons sent to Ukraine are made in American factories. US service members spend most of their payments domestically, and part of the humanitarian aid is also used in the U.S.A. A significant portion of the funding aimed at Ukraine is meant to support the Ukrainian government, which is managed by the World Bank. For example, by December 2023, about $24 billion worth of equipment had been sent to Ukraine from US stockpiles under the Presidential Drawdown Authority. One advantage of these transfers is that they allow the US to clear out older equipment and replace it with newer models. As old equipment is removed from storage, significant funds have been allocated to restock the US inventory that has been depleted. By November 2023, $25.9 billion had been set aside, with $16.8 billion already used to replace the equipment taken from the US supplies. So we're talking US sending their outdated old equipment to Ukraine, which is using it to destroy one of the United States' arch enemies, the cheapest way possible for the US taxpayers, while this taxpayer dollar is actually being spent in the US. I mean, this is a bargain deal to destroy your enemies. It's basically giving it away for free. Ukraine is just giving away their services of destroying US enemies with old equipment. You would have to be stupid not to take it. Usually, the replacements for the old equipment in the US are not exactly the same as what was removed. They often include older models that are no longer in production and may not have the latest capabilities. However, having effective replacement and replenishment plans is essential to ensure that the US stockpiles are ready for any future conflicts. MAGA keeps whining about the US spending too much on Ukraine, but in reality, they're just sending old equipment and getting military upgrades. I mean, it's the best deal, and they'll never admit to it. Old United States military equipment usually ends up in a desert somewhere in Arizona in these vast parking lots where it's going to rust away for the next 50 years until it's like fully done and it goes to the scrap house. Now you can send that equipment to Ukraine and they will destroy your enemies with that. I cannot fit it in my head how this is a bad deal. Okay, let's see what kind of military equipment the US provided so far. The United States is giving Ukraine a wide range of military equipment. This includes heavy weapons like tanks, munitions like artillery shells, and supplies like medical gear and cold weather clothing. Recently, the US had been delivering items that are in short supply in its own military, such as artillery shells and US air defense systems. The US military aid packages are focused on providing powerful weapons and equipment, including HIMARS systems for better firepower and NASAMS for air defense. However, the main goal is not just specific weapons, but ensuring a steady flow of various military supplies that are crucial for combat, like ammunition, vehicles, night vision gear, and spare parts. The US has sent over 200 howitzers, which fire 155mm shells, along with 3 million shells for them. They also sent 72 howitzers that fire 105mm shells and 1 million rounds for those, along with over 700,000 mortar shells. More than 40 HIMARS, which are rocket launchers on light armored vehicles, were delivered along with the necessary ammunition. 10,000 javelins, which are anti-tank missiles. These weapons became symbols of Ukrainian resistance in the early weeks of the war. Additionally, over 120,000 other anti-vehicle weapons were delivered, including 10,000 TOW anti-tank missiles. For smaller arms, the US supplied more than 500 million rounds of small arms ammunition and grenade to Ukrainian soldiers. Washington also delivered 31 advanced Abrams tanks starting in January 2023, along with refurbished T-72B tanks. The support package also includes 300 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles, 1,300 armored personnel carriers, over 5,000 Humvees, and 300 armored ambulances. Additionally, more than 100 patrol boats, coastal defense systems, claymore mines, satellite communication systems, night vision goggles, and over 100,000 sets of body armor were provided. US military aid to Ukraine looks huge on paper, but in reality, it's like giving them a paper airplane and hoping they can fly to Moscow with it. Don't get me wrong, the aid is significant, but it's not enough. Plus all that delay with approval of the budget in Congress and the Biden's hesitancy to allow Ukraine to US long-range weapons is insane. The irony is that the influential congressional Republicans criticized the Biden administration for delaying the permission for Ukraine to utilize long-range US weapons within Russia. They were saying that the decision to lift restrictions on the Army tactical missile systems does not justify the administration's prolonged inaction regarding military assistance approved by Congress. Today, however, Republicans not only are not against the US pause to military aid to Ukraine, But the majority supports the pause on military aid. I mean, they support ending military aid. Leave a like and leave a comment if you are a Republican against Trump. Mad respect to you. Last year, the previous NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned that the U.S. delay in approving a $60 billion military aid package for Ukraine is affecting the battlefield, especially near Avdiivka, where Russia was gaining ground. Stoltenberg believed Congress will eventually approve the aid, but stressed that ongoing U.S. support was crucial since the U.S. is NATO's largest ally. Although Canada and European countries were increasing their aid, they could not fully replace U.S. support. U.S. lawmakers were divided. The Senate had approved the aid packet, but the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, blocked it, while insisting on addressing migration at the U.S.-Mexico border. Why was the House stalling Ukraine aid to fix Mexico's border mess? Because they thought trading tanks for a taller fence is the art of the deal. Oh my God. Sorry, Kyiv, your war's on pause till the wall is Instagram ready. Alright, enough of the US, we gotta talk about the European aid to Ukraine, and here the orange man fascist from the White House has spun most lies. Oh, the Europeans are not paying, we are paying 350 billion. Well, what is the truth? How much has Europe given? Ukraine is in Europe, and Putin has no intention to stop. According to the Kiel Institute, Europe sent a little over 132 billion euros to Ukraine. The European Union, made up of 27 countries, has given around $145 billion in financial, military, humanitarian and refugee support. Most of this assistance, about 2/3, is in the form of grants or material aid, while the rest is in loans. That's another lie Trump has spread, that Europe will get their money back. No, we won't. It's in grants, it's support. We won't get it back. One small part of the loans is $3.2 billion from the EU's share of the G7, which will eventually reach $20 billion. Additionally, the EU has offered about $73 billion directly to the Ukrainian government and for humanitarian aid, including $18 billion to help the millions of Ukrainian refugees who have escaped the war and are now living in European countries. European aid to Ukraine is like a buffet, lots of variety, but when it's time to dig in, they're still waiting for the main course. Again, Europe also helped a lot, but not enough. And I say that as a European, we must do more. Germany and the UK stand as the top supporters of Ukraine, with contributions of about 0.4% and 0.9% of their 2021 GDPs respectively. In comparison, the US has committed about 0.6% of their GDP to the country to destroy United States' arch enemy. 0.6% of the GDP. I mean, this has got to be the cheapest way US is getting rid of their enemies. I gotta say, well done the US, saving some money. While larger economies like France and Italy have fallen short, smaller nations like Denmark and Netherlands are notable donors, ranking 7th and 8th in total contributions from EU institutions, despite having smaller economies. Estonia, my country, donated the highest percentage of its GDP to help Ukraine from January 24, 2022 to December 21, 2024. Estonia contributed 2.2% of its GDP in bilateral aid. Following Estonia, we got Denmark, who donated 2.17% of its GDP. Besides the Nordic and the Baltic countries, Poland also made up a large part of its GDP. Why do tiny European nations outshine the big ones in military aid to Ukraine by GDP share? Well, because we have the experience of the past. We have a history of not decades, not generations, but centuries of Russian aggression and war crimes on our soil with our people. We don't need any lessons on that. It's us who have to teach the big guys here. Obviously, Germany is the second largest donor of military aid. The Federal Republic of Germany has thus far supplied or pledged military aid totaling around 28 billion euros for the coming years. Germany has sent 103 Leopard 1 tanks, Leopard 2 main battle tanks with ammunition and spare parts, 179 MRAPs and so on. Also, Germany supplies Ukraine with air defense systems like 6 Iris-T and 4 Patriot launchers. However, to this day, Germany hesitates to transfer long-range systems. For 3 years, former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has ruled out delivering the Taurus missile to Ukraine. Friedrich Merz, the opposition leader and the new Chancellor of Germany, actually criticized the current limitations on weapons provided to Ukraine. Scholz emphasized the need for a stronger Ukrainian army, stating, and I quote, "We must help Ukraine have a strong army as its economy cannot finance the defense it requires," end of quote. Merz countered that the war could have ended sooner, end of quote, with more decisive support for Ukraine. I gotta say I stand with Merz here. Taurus for Ukraine yesterday, not today. Yesterday, it already had to happen a day ago. But it's not only the US and the EU. In addition to the US and Europe, other countries like Turkey, what's the correct way to say them now? I'm gonna say Turkey. And South Korea have provided military aid to Ukraine. Although it is hard to say how much military equipment Turkey sent to Ukraine, we all saw Bayraktar drones in action in the first days of war. The construction of a Bayraktar drone production plant, a whole new factory in Ukraine, will be finished by 2025. In this year it's supposed to be finished. CEO Haluk Bayraktar said, and I'll quote, "We are 80% done with the construction and ordering machines. Production start will depend on the war situation, but the facility will be ready in August 2025. I am so ready for it to start. It's not only Turkey, it's also Germany's Rheinmetall who is building factories, physically building factories in Ukraine right now. Not small ones, huge ones. But the Bayraktar plant will make several versions of the Bayraktar drone, including the TB2 and the TB3, which differ in size, payload, capacity, and speed. In 2023, South Korea provided 300,000 155mm artillery shells to Ukraine. However, the aid is not direct, as Seoul first sends all lethal aid to the United States, which then is transported to Ukraine. Because this is a legal loophole, because South Korea, according to their law and legislation, is not allowed to aid a foreign nation's military. But they can just send that stuff to the US, and the US sends it. It's cool what they're doing. Foreign aid to Ukraine is an important policy that supports international order, the very same rules-based order that Trump now is demolishing. The US and Europe have provided over $250 billion worth of military aid and financial aid to Kyiv. Now, US and EU together, and the number is still 250 billion, where Trump gets his lie of 350 billion and demand of Ukrainian minerals worth of 500 billion. It's just an orange man fascism speaking. It's a blatant lie. This 250 billion contribution combined from the EU and US has definitely saved the country, saved Ukraine from a quick annexation by Russia. So far, Ukraine has been able to deoccupy large swaths of land since the beginning of the full-scale invasion. However, the most important issue is that this aid needs to be increased, as Ukraine must have a better position for any peace negotiations. It is time for Europe to lead the free world from now on, and also take on the leading role in the path for victory against Russia. My friends, thank you for watching. In the name of truth and against the orange fascist from the White House, stay with me, stay subscribed. I'll make these videos speaking the truth and speaking my mind to you several times a week, 3 to 4 times a week. If you like my videos, become a monthly member of Buy Me a Coffee, and I'll be butchering your names many times a week. Your ears will bleed. Also subscribe and be back, because my next video will be on Monday. Until that time, until my next video, Slava Ukraini, and bye-bye.